I'm Hannah, and this is my 4.1 about ethical and legal issues. So, an introduction and the background of ethical and legal issues. So, before 1947, there generally wasn't any ethical or legal issues that scientists had to abide by when they were conducting experiments. But now, obviously, there are. For example, the Nazis, they used their prisoners to conduct experiments, but also generally led to either severe health problems or death. For example, they used to conduct something called the seawater experiment on gypsies they had as prisoners, and so they fed the gypsies seawater and a little bit of fresh water, and this the aim of this to see is in case a pilot crashes into the sea, that they can live off seawater, and this led to massive health problems and a death for a lot of the prisoners. So as you can see, by now that would not be able to happen in this time of day because obviously it just wouldn't be legal. Other things that happen would be the Zimbardo study. It's called the Stanford Prison Experiment. And this is a study of the psychological effects of becoming a prison officer. They used uni students, and they put some of them as prison guards, some of them as prison officers, and they convinced the prison officers they could do whatever they wanted with these people. So a lot of prison officers abused them because they thought one of them did something wrong, and they thought that was just the right thing to do. And then also there's the Milgram study, and this is about how much pain an ordinary person will put someone through by them answering the wrong question. So there'll be one person having to answer a sequence of the correct questions, and every time they get it wrong, they get electric shock, and every time they got it wrong again, they would get a hard electric shock. So the person would become into a lot of pain if they weren't getting it right. So this is now the Nuremberg Code of Conduct, and this happened after. So prior to 1947, no accepted code of conduct for human experimentation, which led to experiments with the Nazis, happened. But the Nuremberg trial is where people looked closely to what the Nazis have done, and then also the Declaration of the Innskin 1964 made a load of ethical issues. So they came up with 10 points. 1. Voluntary consent. 2. Experimental results should result in good society. 3. Abdicated results should justify the experiment. 4. Avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering. 5. No experiment if there is a chance of death and disability. Minimize risks of subjects. 7 or 8. Proper preparations of facilities to protect subjects. 8. Experiments conducted only by a qualified person. 9. Subjects can withdraw at any time. And 10. Terminate experiment if results are known or with best judgment. So, for example, like the Nazis, they would never have subjects can withdraw any time because a lot of people would have just withdrawn. So now, every time someone wants to do a human experiment, they'll have to stick to this. If not, it will lead to consequences, and I'll explain them in a bit. Also doing experiments, there's something called BASES now, which stands for the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science. So this is basically where all participants follow strict code of conduct. For example, protocols, consent forms, and expectations of the experiment. If you kind of stick to all of these, you can become more BASES credited, so more trust when you do experiments. So means more people are likely to sign up. Also, prior to research commencing, you do institutional ethics and review committee. So that's like tutors, colleges, school ethics committee, protect the participants and researchers. A health and safety to identify hazards, who's at risk, evaluate the risks, record any significant findings, and then review assessment and reuse if it is necessary. A risk-benefit analysis. So risk of harm from the researcher might benefit to humankind. And then ethical clearance, your place of study, title and purpose of study, and how you make sure everyone is safe. Also, not to do bases, but before you conduct experiment, you need to participants prior to data collection. So you need to decide if it's volunteers, making sure they have informed consent, right to withdraw, and making sure they have a health and medical screening questionnaire. And this will just help you protect yourself if they still choose to participate, if they're concerned, and must refer them to a GP if it might be a problem. Just also mention informed consent. So this includes like title of the project, participant statement with date and signature, details of the study and what it includes, statements which researchers might also include, contact information but not always personal number, because if you do have to show it, sometimes a personal, like if it's too personal, like it could have consequences. Ethical and legal documents which can be written or verbal, and declaration to be signed. And this will just all help protection from the researcher. So the researcher has protection that they're not going to like done something that they shouldn't have done, and the participant knows exactly what they're doing throughout the whole thing, and there'll be no legal or ethical issues, which leads on to definitions of legal and ethical. So legal is basically working with the boundaries of civil law. This is what the law says, what's right and wrong. So rather than what humans say is right and wrong. So everyone has to stick within this like guidelines, and if they step out of the guidelines, there will be consequences. And it's basically what you're allowed to do legally in your experiments. Ethical is moral principles to govern a person's behaviour or the conducting of an activity. So it's what's right and wrong gain, and make sure there's no physical or emotional harm. Will come from the research, and not done by fact but done by opinion. So everyone will generally have difficult ethical opinions, but it'll be sort of around the same thing. So if I'm looking at 4 different scenarios, so the first few scenarios do have faults with them, and that's what I'm just going to pick out. So if this is actually to happen in real life, what's good about this scenario, what's bad about this scenario, and what the consequences are, and what they actually need to do to improve it to allow them to like be ethically and legally suited for it. So you're working as a trainer for sports science for regional gymnastics team. You have been asked to prepare research on what body shape is best suited to the best possible gymnast. The head coach has chosen 6 people in the class for the experiment, and once they've been chosen, they had to get consent from their parents. So when I read that scenario, I'm already like quite skeptical about the body size, because a lot of people, definitely maybe young girls, they can be very self-conscious about their body type. So start off with what's good about this. So positives would be they're getting parents' consent for the research. So that's good. So parents can't be mad. However, there's definitely more negatives in the study than positives. Is it didn't use volunteers. The head coach picked them out, so they might have not wanted to participate in the study. Risk of social and psychological harm, as it's to do with body weight. So maybe they would have had to do all these experiments and they really didn't want to, but they had no choice. Because if their parents gave consent, but the actual person who's doing it is the children, like that might not be ethically correct, because that person is doing something they don't want to do. And they didn't do a risk assessment or PAQ, because they're conducting a load of different things, do a body weight. Maybe this person might have a health problem, so they should have done a screening first. Consequences of doing this would probably be something like suspension, fines, and ethical training. They probably wouldn't have anything like prison sentences, because really there won't be any like danger of death in this. So there wouldn't be that much risk to the person, but again, just maybe a fine. Improvements would be maybe consent forms for the participants as well. A risk assessment, so making sure that actually there is no harm, and a health screening test, just to make sure every individual is fit enough to do it. Scenario 2 is class of 12-year-old gymnasts have been asked to either fill out a questionnaire or what they think their current fitness levels are, and the other half have been asked to do a circuit training, which will be recorded and then shown to the whole class for them to mark them. The questionnaire will require them to give full name, address, and personal details like body weight, height, amount of exercise they participate in a week. So again, there's a lot of faults with this type of scenario ethically. So we're looking at young people as well. So already you're going to need to get consent from parents. They're not volunteers, they have been asked. Even though they get a choice to what they want to do, they still haven't got a choice not to do it. And a lot of personal details here, which are going to be shown to the whole class. So the positives of this is there's no deception. All the individuals know exactly what they're doing in the experiment. There's informed consent, and they fill a questionnaire out which shows if maybe any of them has any health problems, they could discuss it with the head coach or the person who's doing the experiments. Negatives is they have not have any confidentiality, can't really say that word, for each individual, because each individual is having to put a lot of personal details down on this questionnaire, and then it's getting shown to the whole class, like body weight, so that's not really giving any privacy, what's not good. Also, not allowing the individual to give consent for their information to be shown to the class. So an individual might not mind their information to be shown, but they need to give consent to it to be shown. The coach can't just, it's not theirs to show. You understand what I mean? So that they're showing their personal information to other people without them actually agreeing, because they might not want them to see. And also, no parental consent as they're under 18. So the parents might actually not know that they're conducting this experiment, which can lead to a lot of issues, especially if it could have any negative psychological or social harm to this person. So consequences of this could be prison sentences, fine, and ethical training. Improvements would be by getting them to fill questionnaire out without them giving personal details involved, and withholding the information and not just showing it to the class without the consent of the individual. Scenario 3 is the effects of using ice baths on young gymnasts after a gymnastic competition. Before they conducted this experiment, the researcher conducted a risk assessment to make sure that there would be no physical or mental harm using the ice bath, and getting consent from the participants. So obviously a positive is informed consent, no deception again, and they did a risk assessment before conducting the experiment, so they could see what any of the harm could be towards a person, so that it won't be like any risk, and if there is risk, the individual will know by you doing ticking the informed consent. And the negatives of this experiment is no participant disclaimer, so really sort of not showing every little bit of danger shown to them, and no health and medical screening questionnaires. This that's right. This could be a negative because if that person does have health problems and gets in a freezing hot cold bath